Hi, today I'm going to talk about the identification of gifted students in our faculty, which is language. Let's start with the definition of gifted student. According to Gani's differentiated modules of gifted and talented student, which is DMGT, giftedness is defined as spontaneous, outstanding, untrained innate ability or aptitude that in the top 10 percentage among the same age peers in one domain. We can see this module from left to right. If you want to develop one's aptitude into competencies or talent, you need to apply this developmental process. For instance, allow a student access to the activities or invest money and time in one particular domain. We can see that there's a part named catalyst that divided into environmental and intrapersonal section in the graph. This part is what we, as teachers, may take some interventions to aid the developmental process that may finally help students achieve their competencies or talent. It was mentioned that Gani's module recognized that there is a group of students who may underachieve but still be gifted. Underachievement in gifted students is defined as discrepancy between ability and achievement. There are several characteristics that are commonly associated with underachievers, from environmental and intrapersonal aspects that handicap gifted students to realize their aptitude and reach their talents. They may be characterized with low self-efficacy, low motivation in doing academic tasks, or low self-regulatory, and etc. So, how does Gani's model DMGT relates to Chinese language learning? As Chinese is not an official language in Australia, it is considered as a foreign language for most of Australian-born students, whether they have Chinese family background. At present, Baijun and Pollack propose that the foreign language aptitude requires one's intellectual and cognitive ability, part of which is consisted of components that related to information processing. So, in order to be a bilingual or multilingual, one would need some intellectual giftedness in the field of verbal and memory. This is because verbal ability included phonetic coding, which corresponding to the input processing. It also requires one's language analytic ability that include grammatical sensitivity. In terms of memory, higher working memory as well as memory as retrieval are imperative for output process, speaking speed, and fluency. Here, I would take Steve Conferman as an example of talented multilingual adult. He's from a Canadian English-speaking family background and has a language learning channel on YouTube, and he can talk about 12 kinds of languages fluently, including Chinese, Mandarin, and Cantonese. So, what a foreign language gifted student who does not yet achieve proficiency might look like? Well, they may have high motivation of language learning, higher capacity with phonological working memory, good long-term memory, able to recall long strings of numbers or symbols and manipulate them with incredible speed. However, we may not only focus on the performance because some of students' giftedness might not exhibit it. These students are characterized with coming from cultural minority groups, feeling pressure and afraid of peer denigration. Maybe some of them suffer from poverty and family dysfunctions, or they can actually be categorized as a twice exceptional student, which is students who are gifted but also have special needs or learning disabilities. So we may focus on the characteristics that highlighted in Baijun and Pollack's research that a gifted student will show higher intellectual cognitive ability. A person that I know learning Chinese as a foreign language from Vietnam background is considered gifted but not yet talented multilingual. He's shown the characteristic of good long-term memory and working memory, which allowed him to acquire verbal materials as much faster and easier. However, he was always shy and nervous, even sometimes stammer to speak Chinese when doing presentation or meeting someone he's not familiar with. But when he speaks to us as a daily talking, he speaks really fluently. So we are responsible for tightly identifying students whose giftedness may not manifest it in an academic circumstance. As high potential and gifted education policy indicated, the principle that we need to use objective, valid, and reliable measurements to identify gifted students in specific subject areas. And the identification can be facilitated by parents' consultation. I like to introduce both qualitative tools and quantitative tools in identifying gifted students. My first suggestion is to use modern language aptitude test, which is MLAT, to measure a foreign language aptitude. Research demonstrated a positive relation between MLAT performance and foreign language learning. Reed's research indicated that MLAT is considered as an effective tool since it mainly measures students' different language abilities in aspects of phonetic coding, grammatic sensitivity, rote learning for foreign language materials, and inductive language learning. Reed demonstrated that the potential diagnostic value of MLAT was recognized by psychologists, and the MLAT scores was used by guidance counselors to build profile of students' strengths and weaknesses and advising them how to best attack their curriculum. However, Wang criticized that MLAT does not represent a complete definition of foreign language aptitude because it does not strongly predict language learning when instruction is less intense or tester require a more communicative nature. So he actually suggested that MLAT score of different parts can be separately considered rather than composing four aspects into one overall score. Some of the underachievers might have a higher ability in one language aptitude aspect, but low in others. Another instrument that we can use could be parent nomination. According to Julian Matthews, parents are most knowledgeable about strengths and weaknesses of their children. This can be an extremely powerful component in identifying gifted students who are disadvantaged and underachieved in the field of language learning. Julian Matthews indicated that parents of linguistic precocious students could accurately identify by measures including early language inventory, vocabulary checklist, and Bailey scales of infant development that focus on the aspects such as receptive language, expressive language, language facilities, and vocabulary. Here is an example of parent nomination form extracted from the official website of Mount Street Benedict College, which is a girls' high school. We can see the nomination form is inclusive since it takes many subject areas into consideration and allows parents to provide information of their children's abilities, which are not exceeded in classroom settings. However, Michael argued that we cannot rely on the parent nomination only to identify gifted students as it prevents the analysis of children whose parents fail to recognize or act upon signs of giftedness. So parent nomination is only in favor of students whose parents are already actively involved in their education and notice the signs of their potential giftedness. We need to try our best to provide ongoing assessment and continuously collecting up-to-date data and create the aptitude and achievement profile for all students. I have outlined a quick reference guide for identification process in language subject area. If you have time, you can have a look at this. Once we can identify effectively, we can then design challenging and complicated assessment for gifted students. Thanks for listening, and here is the reference I used in this presentation. Thank you.